Well, the reports are that U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra berated using profane language Ontario's representative in Washington.
Calls are growing for Ottawa to issue a formal diplomatic rebuke against U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra after an extraordinary scene at a black tie gala in downtown Ottawa. What began as a routine event celebrating Canada-U.S. business ties ended with stunned guests, awkward silence, and headlines across two countries. Witnesses say Hoekstra angrily confronted Ontario's trade representative, David Paterson, using language so harsh that even his own wife later apologized to the Canadian official. It was supposed to be a night of goodwill between partners. Instead, it turned into a reminder that tone can break trust faster than policy ever could. The incident has now become more than a diplomatic embarrassment. It is a test of how Canada defines respect in its most important relationship and whether Washington still knows how to treat a friend. The confrontation unfolded Monday evening at the National Gallery of Canada during an event organized by the Canada-U.S. Business Council. According to multiple reports carried by AP News and Politico Canada, Hoekstra berated David Paterson, accusing him of undermining the Trump administration through Ontario's recent ad campaign. The campaign had quoted Ronald Reagan's 1987 speech praising free trade, a message that now rings uncomfortably against Washington's new protectionist tone. Witnesses say the ambassador's outburst was public and profane. It shocked not only business leaders, but also senior diplomats present at the gala. By the next morning, Ontario Premier Doug Ford publicly demanded an apology, calling Hoekstra's conduct unacceptable and unworthy of a senior diplomat. At Carleton University, foreign policy scholar Fen Hampson published a column in Policy magazine urging Canada's Foreign Ministry, Global Affairs, to summon the U.S. ambassador for what diplomats call a démarche, a formal expression of disapproval. It is a gesture rarely used between close allies, yet in this case, even moderate voices in Ottawa said it might be necessary to preserve decorum. Within 48 hours, the episode had moved from dinner party gossip to a national debate about diplomatic boundaries. For many Canadians, it was not simply about one man losing his temper, it was about the shifting attitude coming from Washington.
And, as many have noted, he was behaving like a proconsul in some distant colonial outpost, not the ambassador of the most powerful country in the world in a friendly, neighborly setting.
To understand why this moment resonates so deeply, it helps to remember what diplomacy is built on: tone, restraint, and mutual respect. Ambassadors are trained to advocate for their government without crossing the line into intimidation. In Ottawa's view, that line was crossed the moment a U.S. envoy publicly humiliated a provincial official on Canadian soil. Foreign policy experts noted that diplomacy often depends as much on civility as on substance. The words of an ambassador can shape not just negotiations, but the overall atmosphere of trust that allows trade and security cooperation to function. When civility gives way to contempt, both sides lose credibility. What makes the Hoekstra episode different is that it did not occur behind closed doors. It happened in a professional setting, witnessed by officials, journalists, and guests who expect diplomacy to represent stability. Canada's concern, then, is not just about one confrontation, but about a broader erosion of norms that once defined relations between allies. Even as President Trump's administration continues to push for tariffs and America First policies, this incident underscores that diplomacy is not measured in duties or dollars. It is measured in the ability to disagree without losing dignity. Ottawa now faces a delicate decision: how to defend its principles without deepening the rift. Premier Doug Ford's demand for a direct apology put pressure on Global Affairs Canada to act. The ministry has several tools, ranging from private communication to a formal summoning of the ambassador. A démarche would be the diplomatic equivalent of a public reprimand, serious but short of expulsion.
Officials close to the process told CBC News that such a step would be measured and respectful, not punitive. The goal is to re-establish tone, not to ignite a standoff. For Prime Minister Mark Carney's government, the episode arrives at a sensitive moment. Canada is preparing for the 2026 review of the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement and is already navigating multiple layers of tariffs and investment tensions. Yet, Carney's cabinet also insists that national dignity cannot be treated as a negotiable commodity. The government's emerging approach is what analysts call quiet firmness. Rather than public confrontation, Ottawa signals its displeasure through institutional channels, firm enough to uphold principle, calm enough to keep dialogue alive. In the world of diplomacy, restraint can speak louder than outrage, and this time, Canada appears determined to let composure be its message.
The controversy around Pete Hoekstra may seem like a personal lapse, but it reflects a deeper transformation in North American diplomacy. Over the past year, Washington's tone with allies has become increasingly transactional. Trade negotiations have been reframed as zero-sum tests of loyalty. The language of cooperation has been replaced by that of leverage and threats. In this climate, an ambassador's public outburst becomes more than a mistake. It becomes a symbol of how the U.S. now projects power. Canada's response, by contrast, offers a different model. Instead of trading insults, Ottawa reaffirms the quiet strength of institutional diplomacy. Observers note that this difference in style has real consequences. As Washington leans on pressure, Canada has deepened engagement across Asia and Europe, signing new energy and defense partnerships with South Korea and opening trade talks with ASEAN. These moves are not retaliation, they are diversification. Each step underscores a strategic shift away from dependence on a single partner whose tone has grown unpredictable. Within Canada, the incident has also struck an emotional chord. Citizens who once viewed the U.S. relationship as untouchable now talk about mutual respect as something that must be earned, not assumed. For many, the Hoekstra affair captures a turning point, a friendly nation learning to draw boundaries politely but firmly. In the end, this is not just a diplomatic story. It is a story about character, how a country responds when tested by arrogance, and how it chooses restraint over retaliation. The call for a formal rebuke of Ambassador Hoekstra has become more than a bureaucratic issue. It is a statement about respect in international life. Canada's measured reaction demonstrates that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, through the steady voice of principle. The United States remains Canada's largest trading partner and closest ally, but friendship cannot erase the need for courtesy. In diplomacy, words can build bridges or burn them. What happened at the National Gallery was a reminder that tone itself carries power. As the story unfolds, one lesson stands out clearly. In an age of tariffs, tempers, and televised politics, respect is still a diplomatic currency. And this week, Ottawa quietly reminded Washington what that currency is worth.
Drill, baby, drill.
With sour trade relations south of the border, some see it as our drill, baby, drill moment, much to the chagrin of others.
We live in the greatest country in the entire world, bar none. We live in the greatest sub-sovereign nation in the world, bar none. And we could be the richest, most powerful, most secure jurisdiction anywhere in the entire world.
The sound of drilling is echoing across Nova Scotia's countryside. What began as a quiet geological project has turned into something far larger. In this small Atlantic province, officials are calling it our drill baby drill moment. It's not just about rocks or minerals anymore, it's about power. For decades, Canada's resource-rich provinces watched as global markets and foreign governments shaped their economic fate, but now Nova Scotia has decided to change that. Its message is simple. If the world wants critical minerals, Canada will be the one to supply them,
and on its own terms. This is the story of how one province became the front line of Canada's new economic independence at a time when its southern neighbor is tightening every screw of its trade agenda. The turning point came quietly but decisively. After years of slow development and environmental caution, Nova Scotia's government announced a sweeping reversal in 2025. It lifted long-standing bans on uranium exploration, removed moratorium on natural gas fracking, and shortened the permit process for mineral exploration. The move shocked even seasoned observers, but it was born from a realization. Canada's economy could no longer rely on imported minerals or the uncertain goodwill of its allies. As the United States tightened its grip on North American supply chains, and as China restricted the export of rare earths, the world entered a scramble for materials that power everything from batteries to fighter jets. In this race, Canada saw both a threat and an opportunity. For Nova Scotia, the response was simple. Rather than waiting for foreign partners to dictate terms, it would start digging and take control of its own future. The deeper motivation was about sovereignty. The provincial government framed the move as part of a broader national awakening, a recognition that energy security and industrial stability begin with control over raw materials. Federal policymakers in Ottawa have repeatedly cited Nova Scotia as a model for strategic autonomy, noting that the province's reforms mirror Canada's new partnerships with Japan and the European Union on battery minerals. By moving first, Nova Scotia positioned itself not as a follower of federal directives, but as the engine of a new national resource strategy, one that blends economic survival with political assertion.
In the rural town of Brazil Lake, where granite hills meet dense forests, the government's new policy took on real meaning. A prospector had been waiting for years to drill for lithium, one of the most valuable minerals of the modern age. When negotiations with a private landowner collapsed, the province stepped in and invoked a rarely used law to force access to the site. It was a move that divided the province. For some, it was heavy-handed. For others, it was leadership. By 2022, mineral claims in Nova Scotia had already tripled to 27,000. Roughly half of those were lithium-related. The International Energy Agency projected that global lithium demand would increase 40-fold by 2040. That forecast turned what was once a niche mineral into a strategic gold mine. Veteran prospectors estimate that even a small lithium mine could create jobs worth about $100,000 per year for local communities, with full-scale projects employing around 200 workers. The message from Halifax was clear. Nova Scotia would not sit on its resources while others decided their fate. It was no longer just economic policy, it was an act of defiance. But this defiance also exposed deep social divides. Many residents, including eighth-generation landowners and Indigenous communities, feared being excluded from decisions that could reshape their environment for decades. The provincial government promised consultation, but skepticism remained high. To its supporters, this was the price of progress, a necessary trade-off to compete in a world dominated by industrial giants. To its critics, it symbolized the erosion of local rights under the weight of global demand. Either way, the policy made one thing clear. Nova Scotia was willing to cross political and social lines to claim its share of the resource future.
To understand the weight of this decision, you have to look south. In 2025, the United States, under President Donald Trump's second term, doubled down on its America First trade agenda. Washington imposed tariffs ranging from 10 to 100% on imports, including metals, vehicles, and industrial components. The intention was to strengthen American industry. The result was very different. Canada, long treated as a predictable supplier, began to rewire its strategy. Prime Minister Mark Carney's government used the tension to accelerate a broader industrial plan. Ottawa and the provinces turned toward Europe and Asia, negotiating sectoral resource agreements to diversify away from U.S. dependence. In that context, Nova Scotia's push for critical mineral development was not an isolated act. It was part of a nationwide movement to secure sovereignty over natural resources, from lithium to cobalt to uranium and rare earth elements. Ironically, Washington's attempt to dominate the North American supply chain pushed its closest ally to build one of its own. The trade war that was meant to secure America's advantage ended up awakening a new competitor right next door. Nova Scotia's mineral rush is still in its early days, but it already carries enormous symbolic weight. It represents a new chapter in Canada's economic identity, one defined by self-reliance, resource control, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. The province's gamble is not without risks. Environmental concerns are real, Indigenous leaders warn that they have not been properly consulted, and the question of how far governments can go in forcing exploration on private land remains unsettled. Yet one fact is undeniable. Canada is no longer waiting for approval. From lithium mines to uranium fields, the country is building a resource firewall that could redefine its relationship with the United States. The North American trade conflict has moved underground, quite literally, and as drills pierce the bedrock of Nova Scotia, they are uncovering not just minerals, but a deeper shift in the balance of power across the continent.